president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
And now, reading from page 2 of volume 2 of your report that's on the screen, you wrote, quote, "If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment," close quote. Now, does that say there was no obstruction?
No.
In fact, you were actually unable to conclude the president did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
Well, we, at the outset, determined that we, when it came to the president's culpability, we needed to go forward only after taking into account the OLC opinion that indicated that a president, a sitting president, cannot be indicted.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president.
It does.
And your investigation actually found, quote, multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, including the Russian interference and obstruction investigations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, Director Mueller, can you explain in plain terms what that finding means so the American people can understand it?
Well, the finding indicates that the president was not exculpated for the acts that he allegedly committed.
In fact, you were talking about incidents, quote, in which the president sought to use his official power outside of usual channels, unquote, to exert undue influence over your investigations. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, am I correct that on page 7 of volume 2 of your report, you wrote, quote, the president became aware that his own conduct was being investigated in an obstruction of justice inquiry. At that point, the president engaged in a second phase of conduct involving public attacks on the investigation, non-public efforts to control it, and efforts in both public and private to encourage witnesses not to cooperate with the investigation, close quote. So President Trump's efforts to exert undue influence over your investigation intensified after the president became aware that he personally was being investigated?
I stick with the language that you have in front of you. Which
Okay.
comes from page 7, volume 2.
Now, is it correct that if you concluded that the president committed the crime of obstruction, you could not publicly state that in your report or here today?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Is it correct that if you had concluded that the president committed the crime of obstruction, you could not publicly state that in your report or here today?
Well, I would say the statement would be that you would not indict, and you would not indict because under the OLC opinion, a sitting president, excuse me, cannot be indicted, be unconstitutional.
So you could not state that because of the OLC opinion, if that would have been your conclusion?
Well, OLC opinion was some guide, yes.
Breaking news overnight, President Trump personally ordered the suspension of hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid to Ukraine just days before he encouraged their president to investigate his political rival, Joe Biden. This development is fueling new calls to open impeachment proceedings in the House.
Of course, all this as the president prepares to address the UN General Assembly here in New York today. Our chief White House correspondent, John Karl, is there with the latest. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Robin. As the president prepares to take the world stage here at the United Nations, this new development, breaking new developments in the Ukraine controversy, raising new questions about whether or not the president pressured a foreign leader to investigate a political rival. ABC News has confirmed reports that days before he talked to the president of Ukraine about investigating Joe Biden, President Trump himself ordered his chief of staff to withhold some $400 million in military aid to Ukraine. This revelation comes as pressure to begin impeachment hearings grows from previously reluctant Democrats.
I don't know how I live in a country, I help lead a country that allows a president of the United States to openly admit to this kind of corruption and get away with it.
And now 7 more House Democrats are joining the call to impeach, writing in an op-ed in the Washington Post that, quote, "These new allegations are a threat to all we have sworn to protect." The president still insists there was no quid pro quo.
I did not make a statement that you have to do this or I'm not going to give you aid. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that.
But earlier in the day, the president seemed to acknowledge he did consider withholding aid unless the investigation went forward.
We're supporting a country. We want to make sure that country is honest. Why would you give money to a country that you think is corrupt?
The president also suggested it wouldn't have been wrong if he did do it.
I think it would probably, possibly have been okay if I did, but I didn't. I didn't put any pressure on them whatsoever.
On the eve of his UN speech, the president dispatched Vice President Pence to Fox News to defend his actions.
He mentioned Vice President Biden and his son in the context of us wanting to see honest government.
And while there has been no evidence of any wrongdoing, Joe Biden's son Hunter did make tens of thousands of dollars a month working for a Ukrainian company while his father was vice president. Biden on Twitter is urging the president to release the transcript of his call with the Ukrainian president. Among the world leaders the president will meet with tomorrow here in New York is the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, who has not yet talked about any of this, George. Meanwhile, I am told that there is serious consideration at the White House of going forward and releasing the transcript of the president's conversations with President Zelensky.
So they might release the transcript, but still holding the line on releasing that whistleblower complaint?
It sure seems I see absolutely no indication that they are going to budge at all on that. And of course, that is the demand from Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
You certainly can understand that the president, aware of Minister Avakov's statements, aware of what Mr. Lashenko was up to, what Ambassador Chali was up to, and these other elements that we've discussed, that there certainly forms a reasonable basis to wonder whether there are influential, elements of the Ukrainian establishment that were out to get the president.
Again, I can't speak for what President Trump thought or what others thought. I would just say that those elements that you've recited don't seem to me to be the Ukrainian, kind of a plan or a plot of the Ukrainian government to work against President Trump or anyone else. They're isolated incidents. We all know, I'm coming to find out myself, that public life can be, people are critical. And that does not mean that someone is, or a government is undermining either a campaign or interfering in elections. And I would just remind again that our own U.S. intelligence community has conclusively determined that those who interfered in the election were in Russia.
I want to take a moment to recognize the courage of my colleagues who have appeared and are scheduled to appear before this committee. I want to state that the character attacks on these distinguished and honorable public servants is reprehensible. It is natural to disagree and engage in spirited debate, and this has been the custom of our country since the time of our founding fathers. But we are better than personal attacks. The uniform I wear today is that of the United States Army. The members of our all-volunteer force are made up of a patchwork of people from all ethnicities, regions, socioeconomic backgrounds who come together under a common oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. We do not serve any political party, we serve the nation. I am humbled to come before you today as one of many who serve in the most distinguished and able military in the world. The Army is the only profession I have ever known. As a young man, I decided I wanted to spend my life serving this nation and gave my family refuge from authoritarian oppression. For the last 20 years, it has been an honor to represent and protect this great country. Next month will mark 40 years since my family arrived in the United States as refugees. When my father was 47 years old, he left behind his entire life and the only home he had ever known to start over in the United States so his 3 sons could have a better and safer lives. His courageous decision inspired a deep sense of gratitude in my brothers and myself and instilled in us a sense of duty and service. All 3 of us have served or are currently serving in the military. My little brother sits behind me here today. Our collective military service is a special part of our family's history, a story in America. I also recognize that my simple act of appearing here today, just like the courage of my colleagues who have also truthfully testified before this committee, would not be tolerated in many places around the world. In Russia, my act of expressing concern to the chain of command in an official and private channel would have severe personal and professional repercussions, and offering public testimony involving the president would surely cost me my life. I'm grateful to for my father's brave act of hope 40 years ago and for the privilege of being an American citizen and public servant, where I can live free of fear for mine and my family's safety. Dad, I'm sitting here today in the U.S. Capitol talking to our elected professionals is proof that you made the right decision 40 years ago to leave the Soviet Union and come here to the United States of America in search of a better life for our family. Do not worry. I will be fine for telling the truth. Thank you again for your consideration. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Frequently frame these complicated issues in the form of a simple question. Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes. Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and I worked with Mr. Rudy Giuliani on Ukraine matters at the express direction of the President of the United States. We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we were playing the hand we were dealt. Everyone was in the loop. Again, everyone's in the loop.
You confirmed to President Trump that you were in Ukraine at the time and that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass, unquote. Do you recall saying that?
Yeah, it sounds like something I would say. That's how President Trump and I communicate, a lot of 4-letter words. In this case, 3-letter.
Donald Trump wanted these 2 investigations that would help his reelection campaign, correct?
I can't characterize why he wanted them. All I can tell you is this is what we heard from Mr. Giuliani.
But he had to get those 2 investigations if that official act was going to take place, correct?
He had to announce the investigations. He didn't actually have to do them, as I understood it.
Okay. President Zelensky had to announce the 2 investigations the president wanted, make a public announcement, correct?
Correct.
You don't have records, you don't have your notes, because you didn't take notes, you don't have a lot of recollections. I mean, this is the trifecta of unreliability, isn't that true?
Well, what I'm trying to do today is to use the limited information I have to be as forthcoming as possible with you and the rest of the committee. And as these recollections have been refreshed by subsequent testimony, by some texts and emails that I've now had access to, I think I filled in a lot of blanks.
But a lot of it's speculation. A lot of it is your guess, and we're talking about, an impeachment of the President of the United States. So the evidence here ought to be pretty darn good.
Is this kind of a 2 + 2 = 4 conclusion that you reached?
Pretty much.
Is the only logical conclusion to you that, given all of these factors, that the aide was also a part of this quid pro quo?
Yep.
Dr. Hill, I want to ask you, you may be aware of some of the attacks on Colonel Vindman, suggesting that he has a dual loyalty, that he's not really loyal to America, he's loyal to Ukraine. I wanted to ask you, as a fellow immigrant, what you think of those kind of accusations when they're leveled against Colonel Vindman or other Americans.
I think it's very unfortunate. I mean, this is a country of immigrants, with the exception, perhaps of very few people still here. Everyone immigrated to the United States at some point in their family history. And this is what for me, really does make America great. I mean, I'm sure that every single person here, some people perhaps came reluctantly, others came by choice, as I did. But this is, for me, this is the essence of America. It's why I wanted to be here and why I wanted to stay here. And I think it's unfair to castigate anyone. I do not believe that my loyalty is to the United Kingdom. My loyalty is here to the United States. This is my country and the country that I serve. And I know for a fact that every single one of my colleagues, and there were many naturalized citizens in my office and across the National Security Council, felt exactly the same way. I think it's deeply unfair. Well, I think you might recall in my deposition on October 14th that I said that very unfortunately I had a bit of a blow-up with Ambassador Sondland, and I had a couple of testy encounters with him. One of those was in June 18, when I actually said to him, "Who put you in charge of Ukraine?" And I'll admit I was a bit rude, and that's when he told me the president, which shut me up. And this other meeting, it was about 15, 20 minutes, exactly as he depicted it was. I was actually, to be honest, angry with him. And, I hate to say it, but often when women show anger, it's not fully appreciated. It's often, pushed onto emotional issues, perhaps, or deflected onto other people. And what I was angry about was that he wasn't coordinating with us. Now, I actually realized, having listened to his deposition, that he was absolutely right. That he wasn't coordinating with us because we weren't doing the same thing that he was doing.
Are you a never-Trumper, or have you been true to your profession and remain nonpartisan?
I honestly don't know what the definition of a never-Trumper is, as I think many of my colleagues are feeling the same way, that it's a puzzling term to be applied to career or non-partisan officials. And I chose to come into the administration. I could easily have said no when I was approached by the people who invited me.
Yes, but you didn't sign up to have hateful calls and the like.
I guess, unfortunately, where we are today in America, that's coming with the territory. They're continuing, honestly. I mean, we're constantly having to block Twitter posts of my name and address, and on the internet. We've been doing this over the last couple of days.
I think that
and as I said in my deposition, this could happen to any single person in this room.
You said in your deposition, specifically, a conspiracy was launched against you by convicted felon Roger Stone on the show InfoWars, led by Alex Jones, right?
I don't think he was a convicted felon at the time that he launched this, so I didn't use those exact words.
Dr. Hill, I want to verify this story. I understand that when you were 11 years old, there was a schoolboy who set your pigtails on fire, and you were taking a test. You turned around and with your hands snuffed out the fire and then proceeded to finish your test. Is that a true story?
It is a true story. I was a bit surprised to see that pop up today. It's one of the stories I occasionally tell because it had some very unfortunate consequences afterwards. My mother gave me a bowl haircut. So for the school photograph later in that week, I look like Richard III, or as if I'm going to be in a permanent...
Well, I think it underscores the fact that you speak truth, that you are steely, and I truly respect that. Let me move to your testimony in your death.
Article 1 is adopted.
A swift warning from Nancy Pelosi to her fellow Democrats. Do not cheer this solemn, rare moment in American history. Donald Trump has become only the third US president to be impeached. Every president's nightmare has already become his battle cry.
Oh, I think we have a vote coming in. So we got every single Republican voted for us. Whoa. Whoa. Wow. There's no crime, right? There's no crime. I'm the first person to ever get impeached and there's no crime. I feel guilty. You know what they call it? Impeachment light. It's impeachment light.
The Democrats got what they wanted, but were careful not to appear too triumphant.
December 18th, a great day for the Constitution of the United States. A sad one for America that the president's reckless activities necessitated us, our having to introduce articles of impeachment.
This has been a tale of two impeachments, one of sober, urgent necessity.
When President Trump conditioned military aid on a personal favor, he harmed America's national security. And when he demanded that a foreign government target his domestic political rival, he took steps to corrupt our next election. To the founders, these offenses clearly merited removal from office.
The other is a story of an unfounded and unfair process.
I see coming off a president who will put his head down even through this sham impeachment, and he will do his job. He will put the American people first. He will tell them that I care about you. He will still put the economy first, and he will make sure this country stands strong. That's what I see in this abyss. That's where we're going.
Americans are now absorbing this moment, but most people had made their minds up before the process began.
Trump's haters have only had their worst fears confirmed. His supporters are echoing his cries of a witch hunt. It's that rare breed now of undecided, independent voters who are crucial. Will they vote for an impeached president?
Americans have witnessed a pitched battle. Donald Trump will continue the fight. Now it's on to the Senate, widely regarded as the place impeachment goes to die. The Democrats' next challenge will be an acquitted, emboldened Trump, intent on another 4 years as commander-in-chief. Amanda Walker, Sky News, Washington.
We see the impeachment managers now who are going to make that walk to the Senate side and formally deliver the articles of impeachment. It is a moment of solemnity in a process that has been filled with rancor. And you can see the grim faces as they make this walk. Live look at the Senate floor, where these articles will be arriving shortly. They'll be handed over to Laura Dove. She is the secretary for the majority. And this begins the formal process leading up to the trial itself. The articles will be exhibited beginning tomorrow. Essentially,
the Senate will receive a message from the House of Representatives.
Mr. President, a message from the House of Representatives.
Mr. President, I have been directed by the House of Representatives to inform the Senate the House has passed H-Res 798, a resolution appointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial of Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
The message will be received.
Now to our exclusive interview with former Vice President Joe Biden, locked in a tight race with Senator Bernie Sanders and others ahead of Monday's Iowa caucuses. Mr. Vice President, thank you for joining us this morning. You just heard the president there. Impeachment
Glad to be here, George.
He said impeachment light, they're going to crush you in November.
Well, I'm glad he's acknowledged it's going to be me. He's so worried about me, he got himself in this mix to begin with. Look, I find this defense absolutely astounding. Yeah, he did it, but it doesn't matter. I mean, George Washington's rolling over in his grave with his farewell address saying, you know, the greatest threat to republics is being interfered with by foreign countries.
But
anyway,
Mr. Vice President, as you know,
Dershowitz didn't do the same constitutional law I did.
Well, let's talk about the Constitution a little bit, because your former colleague Lamar Alexander criticized last night when he made his announcement a wholly partisan impeachment, and that echoed your position during the Clinton impeachment. I want to show our viewers.
It would have been wrong for Richard Nixon to have been removed from office based upon a purely partisan vote. No president should be removed from office merely because one party enjoys a commanding lead in either house of Congress.
If a partisan impeachment was wrong in 1974, wrong in 1998, why isn't it wrong now?
Because it's not a partisan impeachment. He violated the Constitution. Period.
Only Democrats voted for it in the House and one independent.
Well, that doesn't mean that the facts, the underlying facts, George, whether the Constitution's been violated. That's the issue. That's the issue. Was the Constitution violated?
Even if it's a party line vote?
Period. Even if it's party line vote, it just goes, it reflects on those who know, in fact, in their heart and their head, that in fact it's a violation of the Constitution to do what he did, and in fact vote no. That's party line vote, but that doesn't make it right. And a party line vote that is based upon something that doesn't relate to a constitutional violation is a different thing.
Out of that historic victory for President Trump in the impeachment trial, the Senate acquitting him on both charges. This was a straight party line vote, except for Senator Mitt Romney, who did something no politician has ever done before, voting to remove his own party's president from office. Our senior national correspondent Terry Moran is there at the White House with the very latest. And Terry, President Trump expected to take a victory lap just a few hours from now.
He will. He'll be here at the White House holding a press conference later today, and you can expect him to dunk on the Democrats. That's his style. But the White House was enraged. Look, it was never in doubt. The Senate was never going to acquit President Trump. You need 2/3 of the Senate to do that. But there was drama in the Senate chamber, and it came from Mitt Romney with what he called a cry of conscience that he hoped would echo through history, but that enraged the White House.
After months of fighting, the verdict is in.
Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is not guilty as charged. The Senate, sitting as a court of impeachment, stands adjourned sine die.
President Trump and his team victorious.
The president won. The office of the president won. The Constitution won.
But the vote from Republican senators was not unanimous.
Mr. Romney.
Guilty. Mitt Romney becoming the first senator in history to vote to remove a president from his own party in a dramatic speech saying it was his oath before God that guided his decision.
My faith is at the heart of who I am. I take an oath before God as enormously consequential.
Romney said the evidence is clear. President Trump pressured Ukraine to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden for his own political gain.
There's no question in my mind that were their names not Biden, the president would never have done what he did. The president is guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust.
The president and the senator from Utah have a tumultuous past, and Romney predicted his decision would bring swift retribution.
I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters.
He was right. Donald Trump Jr. saying Romney, the 2012 Republican presidential nominee, should be expelled from the party. Overnight, the president tweeting had failed presidential candidate Mitt Romney devoted the same energy and anger to defeating a faltering Barack Obama as he sanctimoniously does to me. He could have won the election. Republicans have long argued that impeachment would play right into Trump's hands in the next election.
Exoneration comes when President Trump gets reelected.
because the people of the United States are fed up with this crap.
But Democrats still insist the president's day of reckoning will come.
My message is simple. Don't lose hope. There is justice in this world, and truth, and right.
Many Democrats are demoralized, but some are vowing to continue the investigations. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler says he is going to subpoena John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor, see what he has to say. But Robin, I have to tell you, there are other Democrats saying enough is enough. Let's look towards the election.
Many are saying that. Okay, thank you.